All right, welcome everyone. I'm going to go ahead and start our panel discussion now and let people in as they trickle in. Thank you. It's so great to see everyone's faces. This show has been a smashing success. It's incredible. And that's really due to all of you. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say. A couple of logistical things at the beginning. We are recording. And this will go up on our website so that people who aren't able to join can view the panel discussion. If you're not an artist, if you could mute yourself, and even if you are an artist, mute yourself just so that we don't have any background noises. And then if you want to turn your video off as well, and the viewers can watch in presenter view, and that will be a little bit better of an experience for you, more streamlined, but it's completely up to you. If you want the sea of faces, go for it. Also, please use the chat if you have any questions at all during this discussion. And at the end, about 15 minutes before 12, we will open it up and I'll read some of those questions out. If I don't get to everyone's questions, hopefully we can maybe answer them in the future on another platform or through email, postings, anything that we can do for that. So, and I forgot to introduce myself for some of you who don't know, I'm Sarah Labar, and I'm the Executive Director of Artwork Center for Contemporary Art here in Loveland, Colorado, and we are hosting this incredible exhibition. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jane Burke, who is our fabulous guest juror and curator, who really is the Wonder Woman behind this exhibition. So thank you so much, Jane, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Right back at you. I mean, this wouldn't be possible without, this platform of artworks, and also just the timing. Sarah really spearheaded this exhibition in terms of having an overlap over AAPI Heritage Month. So I feel like, I think everyone knows we're getting, extra traction during this month where we can really celebrate each other and all of the success of the exhibition, but your ongoing art careers. So I'm really excited to dive deeper this exhibition. For those who haven't seen it, there's 15 participating artists. It was a juried exhibition, so we pulled from all over Colorado. Sarah and I specifically wanted to target local artists to be able to build a bridge, to build a community amongst Asian American artists in Colorado. And primarily, I think the impetus was based on the artworks is located in Loveland, Colorado. Again, I've said this many times, but it's a historically homogenous community. It's, really an agricultural hub. And so I've been saying this, that Loveland is really like a character in this exhibition, as if we're like making a movie in New York. I feel like Loveland is really this backdrop because it puts you in this psyche of being in a place where you probably don't expect to see so many Asian voices. And so that to me is what's been really impactful, because I, was really conscious of not wanting to pigeonhole artists according to their identity. I think it's something that should really come from the artist's voice themselves and not necessarily a projection onto them. But I really feel like, today's discussion will allow the artists to speak for themselves and really not to focus so much on identity, but really what it means to be an Asian American artist in Colorado specifically, because, as we know, it would be very different if your practices were in LA or New York or in Korea or, elsewhere. So I think really what I wanted to get at the heart of this exhibition is what it's like to be a Colorado Asian. And again, the title of the exhibition is sort of a riff on the bumper sticker, which is, the native Colorado bumper sticker that we see on people's cars. And so that's really where the idea came from, to kind of say, who's native. I grew up here. I don't feel quite, a native. I was actually born in South Korea. But, as far as the influx of transplants, sometimes I do feel like, I can flex, well, I'm a local. So I think, it's a lot coming from that. But that said, I would like to, I'm going to be like a school teacher and call on you just to make it easier so we don't have to have the awkward moments of silence. And then, yeah, I'd just like to have the artists introduce themselves and also to say where they're based. Grace, I see you right to the right of me.
Hi, thank
Hi.
you, Jane. My name is Grace G, and I am in Louisville, Colorado. I've been here for 11 years now. I originally am from Canada, so my heritage is um, Chinese. My parents were born in China and came to Canada when they were teens, and I grew up there, but I did live in Asia for a few years during my high school there, actually. Um, and yeah, I'm loving Colorado for a lot of different reasons, but I'm here in Louisville.
Thank you, Grace. You leapt onto my next question because I always think it's funny, people say, "Well, where are you from?" And you say, "Colorado," and then people say, "No, where are you really from?" And so I was like, I think as Asians, we all experience that. So you really dove into my next question. So if everyone else wants to follow suit and say, where you live currently, but also, kind of your background story. Erin, you're next in my queue.
Hi, my name is Erin Kang. So it's actually Hyun Hee Kang, but my husband and I came to a conclusion that we should have American name because people kept asking me how do you pronounce it, how do you pronounce it, so I had to come up with the American name, which was kind of sad. But so it's I go by Erin Hyun Hee Kang. I came here when I was 16, and now I lived in New York most of years, and I met my husband. That was a surprise in my life, and everything that I planned didn't go the way I planned with my husband. So I ended up being in Colorado. And so far, I love it. It's a great place for kids, raising kids and all that. But at the same time, I miss the diversity, and I always wanted to go to San Francisco or like New York City, a little bit bigger town because of the diversity issues. But I came here, and now I teach high school. I'm a visual arts teacher at Centaurus High School, and I live in Boulder, Colorado. I live 3 minutes away from King Super, where that tragic happened. So, and I was there about 28 minutes ago. I was looking at my receipt with my kiddos. I was there 28 minutes ago. And now I think about it, it's like all the people that I passed, in and out, are they okay? Like, did I see anyone? It just, questions arise in my mind. And the diversity issues, Boulder is pretty white, and I had to, I talked to a lot of the school moms and stuff, and I realized that there's like a hidden kind of um should I say ignorance, or maybe they don't have knowledge in certain stuff, and they just assume what it is to be Asian Americans, as those things. It's kind of hard to deal with, as to live in Colorado and having this opportunity, having a show and show them we exist, and having this community build up is really great opportunity for me. So I'm really happy. Thank you, Jane. Should I call on somebody? Okay. Why don't I do Liz Kwan?
Hi, my name is Liz Kwan, and I was born in New York State. My parents were born in the States, So I am, and one grandparent was born here, so I'm like 2.5 generations. I moved to Colorado probably about 15 years ago to do a ceramic program at CU. I, living in Colorado, I lived in New York City for 15 years. I've also lived abroad, like in France, but when you ask specifically what is it like in Colorado, it's very different than New York. I mean, it's clearly not as diverse, and I really miss the culture and just everything, the museums, it's just the languages that you hear when you live in a city. But the thing about Colorado is it's very quiet. It's very, I love how peaceful it is, and it's a little bit easier living in some respects than a big urban city. And so, yeah, I mean, I can't believe I've been here 15 years. I stopped counting, but it's been interesting. It's clearly, I've grown up in such predominantly white neighborhoods that I've been very used to it. I've grown accustomed to it, despite living in New York for such a long period. I don't know. So sometimes I feel actually quite torn between two cultures.
Yeah, I think what you said about the quietness, I was talking about that before. And also it's crazy, you're both in Boulder, you and Aaron, and to have such an intense mass shooting happen in a place like Boulder, I think brings that big city sort of crime into your face in a place that is otherwise so quiet and isolated and homogenous. So it's interesting now, I think no matter where you are, you're not immune to these sort of horrific tragedies. But yeah, I think that there is a sense of peace here in some ways with the environment. But as far as being stimulated by the diversity, I think we all feel that, we're regenerated. At least I feel that way by going to a place like New York, and then you can come back to like here. But it always helps to get out of Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, I have to, otherwise I get a little stir crazy. I mean, it's really, yeah, it's not, it's a bubble, as they say, Boulder is a bubble.
Exactly. Yeah. Sammy, maybe you can speak to your experience. You've been able to go back and forth to South Korea, to Seoul quite a bit.
Yeah, my name is Sammy, and I've been in Colorado, I was counting, 14 years. And I came to this state. I came to actually Southern California at age of 16, and it was out of my choice. Not like really, I didn't come with a family, maybe like Aaron did. So that's kind of a little bit unique about my background. And ever since I came to Colorado, I've been regularly going to Seoul, and I've been working there every summer. Yeah, that's been kind of the pattern. And I wonder about what kind of changes and unique challenges that living in Colorado has offered me is that I remember being in high school in Southern California. It was in Orange County. There are just plenty of Asian kids, and I see them all kind of grouped based on when they came and based on their cultural background. And I think I would have found, and I had found living in California, just a group of people that it's just like me, because there are plenty of them. So I was very comfortable within that bubble. But I think living in Colorado, I get to meet a lot of people who are different, and learn that Asian American have very diverse narrative in their immigration, just the diaspora and the different route of entering into the US and how we view things, and even just the culture itself, it's very, very diverse. So I think that was a kind of the opportunity for me to learn beyond my comfort zone, you know. Had I, stayed in a place like California or bigger city. So there's something that I appreciate, but it requires me to actually getting out regularly. So that's kind of how I've been able to, and that was kind of what I wanted to continue to just kind of work in Seoul and in Denver.
Sue, you're another South Korean transplant. Do you want to talk about your story? And you're in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, so my name is Soo Kaden Cho. My Korean name is Soo Hyun Cho. But I got my US citizenship like about like 5 years ago, and I decided to why not add in add in an English name. So Kaden is something that I kind of like decided to go with. But I came here when I was born and raised in South Korea. I was born in Seoul but lived in Daejeon. And I moved here when I was 9 years old. But so we moved out here about like year 2000. So it's been about like 20 years, 21 years now. But it's been on and off. I've been going back and forth because at the same time, like I have hard time and struggling with like my identity, as in like where do I really belong? Like, because I don't consider myself as Korean or American. Whether I go back home, like, living here for 20 years, like our family go back to Korea like every summer. So every time we go back to visit, it's kind of like weird, but like, my grandparents would, see me and they would ask me like, how's America? And like, I would answer appropriately and they would say, oh, I feel like you're too like Americanized. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Because I feel like I'm one of you, So it's very like I have like hard time like kind of like struggling to decide whether to fit in, like, like I have to put on this mask to fit in with like the people in Korea. And whenever I come back to the States, I have to put on a different layer of mask to fit in with the people here. So it's kind of like, where's my true form? Like, where's my identity? Like, I feel like I'm always like hidden behind this layer of mask that I truly want to show, but like it's hard for me to show because it's hard for me to relate to the people or the society. So I mean, I don't know, like living in Colorado, it's not the most diverse place, and especially in the Springs area. I'm from Colorado Springs, so like living in the Springs area, like even though there is a bit of a community, it's not as diverse. So but but living here, I had the opportunity to kind of like, fight for my own battle and like understand my true form and kind of like, able to speak up my own my diversity, my Korean ethnicity, and kind of like teach among this community. Like I felt like, am I gonna hide away because like I'm scared? Am I like, like, anxious and like whatnot? But like instead, I was able to kind of like overcome that and empower myself to kind of like, show to the community, like, it's not you, this is me, like, and kind of like show them the lessons of like, the culture and the diverse. So I don't know, like the opportunity to live in the Springs, like I'm constantly learning like every day. So
I
yeah.
think your art really speaks to that. So thank goodness you found art, because I think you're really able to express all of those ideas, and your art really comes through. So yeah, it's such a good tool for that kind of
Right.
duality that I think we all sort of struggle with, going back and forth.
Mhm.
Margaret, I know you're in Colorado Springs as well. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Margaret Kasahara, and I grew up in Boulder. I was born in New York City, and but my first birthday was actually in Boulder. And like I don't remember if it was Emily who said that they lived very close to that King Soopers, and I grew up just a mile away. And it's kind of funny to hear about how lack of diversity people feel about Boulder, because when I was growing up, I felt like I was the only one. I mean, there was very, very few Asians. And so if I go to a grocery store in Boulder, I think, wow, look at all these Asians, you know. But I, I guess my art is like Sue's, is very much about my identity. And I've never, I guess initially as a child, I had those issues about duality, and some of the paths I followed, I kind of changed because of what I thought my limitations were because I was Asian. But I have since found out it's a lot of that is really in my head and in my heart. And so art has become a way for me to work through those. And I'm now at a place where I'm very comfortable with my skin, and it's more of what my everyday life is. And so it's how, you know, what does it mean to exist in this body, to have this face, and to have, you know, this, be in this time and in this place. And so I don't know, I'm very comfortable with where I am now.
Well, I think again, you know, my next round of questions will lead to this more, but you know, how really your art making processes have been impacted. But I also want to hear from Mommy. You're next. You're next to Margaret on my screen.
I'm not at home. I'm at the student league today at my studio day, so it's not really a attractive sort of a background. And I'm very sorry. My also camera is vertical simply because I brought my iPad, and then I have to kind of stand up because camera is on the side. But anyway, here I am. My name is Mami Yamamoto. I am from Osaka, Japan. I came to United States 1985, long time ago. And my initial sort of intention was to become American, you know, the strong sort of a career woman type of image, you know, walking in New York, Fifth Avenue with the briefcase and the tennis shoes. That type of, I don't know, some of you are so a lot younger than me, but that was my age sort of a group that I was just so focusing that I'm gonna become like that, not like Japanese submissive woman with stay home and blah, blah, blah. And so that was a goal, and I came to United States, and here I am after 35 years, that so many things happened to my life, well, including sort of unexpected sort of careers and everything. So prior to my printmaking that I'm doing currently, I was working for antique business for Japanese folk art and textile and cabinetry for over 20 years. But besides just what I was doing prior to what I'm doing now, I have moved to so many different parts of the United States, which really educate me so many different ways. The first city I went was Akron, Ohio. That was a very first city. And it's because I didn't want to meet with any Japanese people. I wanted to situate myself and just surrounded by 100% Americans, and then purely kind of a coded American things around myself. And it's sort of like it worked for a while, but then gradually, just like antique pieces, when it's kind of getting older, inner sort of a core start coming out. And I'm not saying I'm becoming a sort of a aesthetically beautiful like antique pieces. It's externally I'm aged, you know, 35 years later, But I think I feel a lot more comfortable in terms of identity. I did going back and forth, and I am. Every time I go back to Japan, my entire family is still there, and they always tell me that you don't talk like a Japanese, or you don't act like a Japanese, even the way I hold a fork, for example. So, that kind of gives me, oh, okay, maybe I'm no longer Japanese-like. But then, of course, when I'm here, there's a lot of a reminder of being Japanese. And I'm just so grateful now that I do have a very unique core inside of me. But, I can pretend I can still eat tacos and pizza night and all kind of things. So everyday life is pretty much all American. And it's okay to not to have a one or the other. I'm sort of in between, and I feel that it's a set. And because when I came to Colorado, that was around late 90s, 1995-ish. Certainly there's not many Asian in Denver, and but it's to me that some events sometimes are like where are you from, or or sometimes it's very blunt, no kind of question and so forth. And I used to get really offended. But now I feel like it's a mission to educate those people. It's okay, because some people never had a chance to go out or go outside of their box or their environment. And so it's a great chance to talk about it, or tell them about where I'm from and what's the difference and so forth. And so I feel a little bit more relaxed in terms of, how I feel and so forth, and when I encounter in a specific situation like that. But it's
That's a
certainly.
wonderful perspective, Mommy. I think
I'm
it's
sorry?
it's a wonderful perspective. I think, to feel relaxed about it, because I think we all encounter it, and to be a minority but not feel sort of on the defense, but really to treat it like an opportunity, I think is a great approach.
And I think it's something to do with the age, I feel more accepted. And what can I do?
I mean,
acceptance, and then that actually give you a new beginning.
Sure.
I'm not talking about religion in anything here, but it
No, I agree. You have a freedom. Yeah. Taiko, I wonder if you have a similar experience.
Hi, my name is Taiko Chandra, and I'm from Japan, like same as Mami. And yes, I feel some similarity. I live in the US just 20 years, but because my husband, British, and decided to study come to US. And before we live in the UK for 3 years. I think that it's been very interesting, and how can I say, space, also the identity always interests me, also struggle me a lot. And particularly interesting when after living in the UK 3 years, went back to Japan, because I went back to Japan, origin country, but visually I'm Japanese, but I had an interesting experience when working in a company. And when I started giving an opinion or thought, so people see me different. And once I was told I'm not Japanese anymore, that was probably my, I start thinking more identity. And then came to the US, and it's just absolutely interesting. And I think that more like, as more I live in the country away from my original country, and I'm used to maybe geographically, physically distance, but mentally, I think that I always being in a between space, and that was always transforming. And living, sorry. So that I live in and my husband and I came to moved to the Miami 3 years, and living in Austin, Texas 6 years, and coming to the Colorado because at last I got the green card. I can do anything, but before I couldn't. So we struggle economically, and there is all limitation what I could do and we could do. But and I feel like that. So I took my first art classes. I always interested, and that's kind of the open up the expression and particularly art. And how can I say? I'm not used to talk, but I think I feel the freedom and art just interesting through my identity and very emotionally challenged, and particularly the pandemic just, I mean, more than before pandemic, my personal experience and the political surround me, and all police brutality, racism, violence, and it just made me think about so deeply anything, my struggle, reflect my personal, my past, and I have to face up the history. I mean, which was Japan mostly.
Yeah.
And still, I'm just processing all of my experience, thought, and difficulty. But it's just interesting. Being majority, I would say being majority and being minority was very interesting. And I could see when I went back to Japan, kind of invisibly, I'm not the majority anymore. So that's kind of the thought and actually struggle to makes me art to think about it. Also, I wouldn't say my art probably struggling with thought makes me also appreciate how am I and where I live, where I'm from, and more like positive think, appreciate the positive thing, I think.
Yes, I mean, your work has so many layers, Taiko, so I think that you're really successful in, you know, reaching all these different parts. And I think that's really, you know, again, contingent on where you are, whether you're a minority or a majority, and it's not necessarily, you know, it's very fluid, I think, our identity. So I think your work really, really captures that. Nad, do you want to speak about your experience? I think your experience is fascinating. I just recently learned more about your immigration story.
Yes, so my name is Na Vu. Na is actually a Vietnamese name, but I'm ethnically Chinese. I was born in Vietnam, and when I was 2, my family and I fled Vietnam by boat. So we were considered boat people. We ended up in the Indonesian refugee camp in a couple of months after we fled, and then a family in Bellevue, Washington, which is right outside of Seattle, sponsored us, and so that's how I ended up growing up in Seattle, and I lived there for over 30 years. And I guess growing up in Seattle, there were a lot of Asians there, so that was comforting. But I found out that just because I had a lot of Asian friends doesn't mean that I knew anything about being Asian. And so with growing up with immigrant parents, especially parents that came from a communist society, I don't know if any of you can relate to me in that aspect, but they always had this sense of fear, fear of government, fear of people listening in on their phone calls, fear of putting their money in the bank. And so I was raised with an immense amount of fear. Like, they wouldn't let me go out to the mall. I didn't have what you would call a traditional American childhood, which is kind of, I think, what we always wanted because that's what everybody else had. And so I grew up with a lot of questions about just what it was like what it's like to be myself, what it's like to be Asian American, what it's like to be Asian or American. I really didn't know or could figure out, where I fit in. And so in my early 20s, I moved to Taiwan. I'm Tainan, Taiwan. And I don't know if Jane and Sue were there at the same time, but I was there during the big earthquake as well. And that was actually quite terrifying to be
Yes.
in an apartment building as the building swayed back and forth. So I lived in Tainan for about 5 years. And that's where I learned how to paint in traditional ink and brush. And that process and meeting my teachers really helped me answer a lot of questions about, things that were unusual about my background, like why my family acted the way they did, or why there are certain quirks about being, Chinese. And I think that living there gave me that sense of who I am, not necessarily being Chinese, but just accepting myself for who I was. And I agree with Mommy in a lot of ways, where when I came back, I had this sense of confidence of being myself, whether it was being Asian or American. And I travel actually to around over 20 art shows around the country. And and I'm in a lot of areas where there are not a lot of Asians. And after doing art shows for a couple of years, I felt that being, 3 or 4% of the population, a lot of people don't get a chance to meet Asians on a personal level. And I felt like it was our responsibility, not only as Asians, but as artists, to allow people to get to know what an Asian is like all the positive things about being Asian. And I felt that all I've gotten has been really positive and amazing responses. And I've been able to meet, a lot of wonderful, people that way. And so, I felt like this journey has been, well worth it and very fulfilling.
Well, thank you, Na. I mean, your work is just breathtaking to me. I think it's funny. We were in Taiwan at the same time. And,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being here. I know you're in Fort Collins, and so you're representing the northern point of our sort of Colorado diaspora. I think Thomas, I saw I'm so sorry I missed Raj. Raj left. He also represented our mountain region, being from Eagle, but I think he just left the chat. But Elaine, I'll defer to you. I see you also. Elaine is another executive director in Longmont, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
My name's Elaine Waterman, and I am in Longmont. And I actually am a first generation Filipino. I was born in New York City. And then as a lot of the artists were, I'm hearing that a lot of you were born in New York. My parents moved from New York to a really small town in Virginia. It's actually Colonial Williamsburg. So we lived right next to Colonial Williamsburg, but it was pretty it was a pretty white community. And as far as forming my identity there as an Asian American, my family really kept their Filipino heritage and culture very separate. So we would have these really traditional, like we had the traditional foods and we had all these parties with the Filipino community there in Williamsburg, but that was very separate from how I was like growing up in school and things like that. So we kept our lives very, very separate, whether we were celebrating our culture or whether we were trying to assimilate. And then after that, I ended up moving back to New York, and I worked there for a little bit, and then moved to Colorado. When I moved to Colorado, I moved actually to Vail, and somebody was saying how at that time, they were really like the only Asian person in their town, and that was really my case as well. So living in Vail, somebody would say, "Oh, Elaine, she's that Asian girl, and it would be like, oh yes, I totally know who you're talking about. So definitely that was, it was kind of an interesting feeling because it was nice to be known, like people knew you automatically, but also it was very isolating, and so it was definitely an interesting situation. Um, I moved to Longmont and Boulder and ended up starting a family. I met my husband actually in Belize. We were both vacationing there. But so now we have two boys, and I moved. We all moved to California, and we only stayed there for 2 years. But it really gave my kids an opportunity to experience seeing Black and brown kids in the same environment. Like here in Colorado, it really isn't as diverse, obviously, as California. Um, and even though we missed the community here in Longmont, and that's the reason why we moved back, I'm really thankful that they got that experience as part of growing up. Um, so I guess as far as my experience in being an Asian American, I do have a lot of issues with my identity just because it's always been very separate. Um, and when my parents first moved here, they did change their last name so that uh, people wouldn't have a hard time saying our last name, or we would always have to be spelling it and saying it phonetically. So um, I remember when I was a kid, they would say, well, no, don't sign your name with that anymore. You have to now sign it with this name. And I would try and hyphenate it. And they were like, no, 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 just take it out. Just use your new name, your American name. And I didn't really understand that at the time. And now, as I'm getting older, um, as as an arts educator and an educator, I work with kids, and I really feel like the kids and the teenagers that are growing up now are so socially active, and they're so willing to do the work and kind of really say, I'm here and this is who I am. And even though I'm the adult, I'm really learning from them. And so I really feel like the kids that I'm working with right now are really helping me reclaim my identity. uh I've always felt like this, like white proximity privilege, and I didn't really understand where that was coming from. But now that I'm getting older, I know that was it mommy had said, you're older and you just don't care now, you're just gonna be who you are. And I really feel like that's where the stage I am at right now. And working with kids has kind of helped me get there. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride. Growing up, my parents always told me, you could do anything, but then there was always this background talk of don't speak until you're spoken to, and kind of this invisibility. So there was that like fight that was always going on. Like, um, we moved to America for the American dream. You can be anything you want, but don't draw too much attention to yourself. So it's this weird dichotomy, and I'm really finally at an age where I can be like, oh, whatever, I don't care about that. I'm just gonna be who I am.
Um, but Elaine, yeah, I think it's really true. It's such a generational shift that's happening. Um, and I think, I've talked to other artists who are parents, and I think it's really exciting. I think part of the motivation to do this show is just to be able to show our children, representation. And also, I just like to say that another question, there's so many of us, so I think it's challenging to go around, but I just really think that it's so empowering to use art again as a form to help others. I think it's not just ourselves, because I always approached art sort of as my own self-help and sort of, grappling with all of these identity issues. But I really think like being together and, just hearing each other's stories today has been really helpful to just know, we're not alone, and that there really is a lot of intergenerational voices here today at the table, and that we're all coming from such different backgrounds. As Sammy said, you know, there's so much diversity even within Asia, as we know. We're definitely not a monolith, so it's very, it's really lovely. And again, I'm so honored to be able to get to know you through this project. I know we only have 10 minutes left. I want to do this for the rest of the day, but I want to also open it up to the public if anybody has any questions. I know that I can ask my own questions of you another time, so I want to open it up. Sarah, I don't know how to really manage the chat, but if there's anybody who has a question out there.
Not seeing any questions quite yet. Lots of great comments in the chat today.
I think just in general, you know, what some of you touched on it, but really, you know, how and when you decided to become an artist. I think we had a little smaller session earlier, sort of before the opening of the exhibition, and we were talking about how difficult it is oftentimes, especially as a first generation immigrant, to be an artist or be in the arts. So if anybody wants to speak of their process of how they kind of became, you know, declared themselves an artist, which is hard in any case. Feel free to just go for it, Erin.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear that everyone says, you know, like, I don't feel necessary to feel different or Asian. I felt exactly the same. But once again, you know, I felt like I was fine, you know, I'm part of the community, but there's some times when things are so bad that I realize that there's a sense of fear within inside of me that, you know, I need to bring it out, and which I do in my art, which is a therapeutic process for me. Of, you know, identifying who I am. For example, when King Super happened, you know, we were watching this instant, you know, there's a person who was filming from the parking lot, you know, the whole incident from beginning till end, and who was actually inside of the building, and then came out, and he was just in the corner filming the whole thing from the parking lot. And I was watching it instantly as it was happening in there. The strange thing was that I felt like I felt this sense of fear that the suspect, I was just wishing that suspect is not a minority, you know? And I felt like if this was a minority incident, then I felt like I was going to get kicked out of my community. I felt that fear for a second, you know, and then I realized, oh, I'm different. You know, maybe I'm Asian, maybe I'm minority, I'm colored person. So there's that sense of realization that, you know, the fear, not belonging, and also, you know, responses from the neighbor, because right after that happened, after one day, you know, I thought, you know, I was belong to this group of, you know, beautiful, wonderful neighbors and the community. But then, you know, there was a text message going around, and then they're basically saying, and I was the only minority person in that text message. And then they're talking about, you know what, we need to get rid of the guns. In order to do that, you know, I have a text message right here. Maybe we should hand out AR-15, you know, the guns to Black and brown people, you know, so they can ban the gun right away. And when I hear those comments like that, and, you know, they say, it actually worked in California when Reagan was governor. The Black Panthers started to open carry, they shut it down right away. And then they said, oh, that's a screwed tactic to leverage racism for the greater good. there could be a poetic, beautiful poetic justice from color people there. Stuff like this is coming to me as a text message. It makes me feel like I'm not belonged. I felt like I need to, so I raised my voice, you know, saying, you know, I cannot even believe that you guys are talking about this like this at such a moment like this. So I wrote this like huge long text message to all this, you know, like 12 people in the text message. So when I face this incidents like that, you know, I don't know, maybe you guys are, I feel not belonged. And by, you know, after having this show right after King Super incident, you know, I felt such a peace. And one of my work showing there is about the fear that I can't get to the top of this, you know, what is it, the cycle of life, which is a wisdom of life. One of the pieces that I submitted, but it's blocked by a cloud, you know, coming from nowhere. It's a natural force, and I can't get to the top, you know, which kind of represents my fear of not belonging, a fear of something that I cannot control if something like this happens. A text message, something like that within the community that comes to me, you know, that fear is there and I can't ignore that. But having this, you know, meeting like this and having everyone come together, sharing stories, and I don't know, we should do this more often.
It's true, Erin. I didn't bring up that, you know, the tragedies kind of that were sort of at the, you know, they were really bookended, you know, this exhibition and the beginning by Atlanta and then Boulder. And I don't think we really talked about it as a group per se, but obviously it has a huge impact and really, I think, brought about, like, you know, even more relevance to this show, not just for the community, but for, you know, you as an artist community. And I guess that's what's interesting is sometimes I think artists are coming from a place of privilege. And so sometimes we aren't subject to totally being considered, you know, part of that. So when people, I think, talk about sort of Black and brown people, and then oftentimes I have the case where like, oh, but not you, you know, and I think that
Yeah.
there is that, like, so there's these two different senses of belonging. So that's why I think it is so important to help each other, to validate each other. Oh no, we are Asian. We are part of this other community. We do exist in these spaces, and I think it is just because of the homogeneity and not per se, you know, anything that's done in an overt racist way, but that it does exist in those text messages. I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything particularly about sort of the socio-political climate that's going on right now in response to where we're at. I know we only have 5 minutes left.
One question that came through the chat and a couple of great comments that I'd like to read out. But the first question comes from Brandy Coons, who says, I wanted to say thanks for doing this and great work putting together the group exhibit. I know there's concern that we might lose the momentum gained in the past year or so in talking about diversity. Are there any plans to continue this show or something like it in the future?
We also, next Saturday, related to this exhibition, we have a poetry reading by 5 poets who have all been published. There's 2 that are local, Meta Sarmiento and also Katarina Jang, and they will both be reading, as well as 3 other poets who formerly lived in Colorado. So we're really excited to have this programming related to this exhibition. And I personally feel very motivated just because of the response and because there's such a wide range of artists represented here to continue, you know, having sort of an outlet, a support system for each other, but also a way to help you know, highlight the work of all the Asian American Pacific Islander artists locally and to have bigger conversations nationally, internationally. So yes, I'm highly motivated to keep this conversation going. And I'm sure, I know that all the artists are as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can second that, just coming from Artworks Center for Contemporary Art. I'm very, very much dedicated to continuing this conversation, not just in the AAPI community, but other communities that have not had not had a chance to have their voices heard. So I think that's really important, especially now, and we are dedicated to keeping those conversations for years to come. It's just so important. So thank you for that question. I have a real quick couple of comments that I want all the artists to hear because they're fabulous. Colleen says the real beauty of America is the richness of all the unique worldly backgrounds of the people that live here. You are all amazing and extremely talented artists. I agree. Your dedication and resilience is inspiring. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, Colleen. And Bernadette says, thank you, artists, for sharing your work and personal stories with the rest of us. I appreciate your contributions to our community. So really, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure getting to know all of you and the artists, and I hope that we get to work together in the future. Selfishly, this has been really fun to just have so many new, amazing, talented artists on my radar. So you'll definitely be hearing from me. And Jane, do you have any last words?
The show is up through May 29th, so you still have a chance to see it if you haven't gotten a chance to. There's also works online, and the work is all for sale. So you're also, you know, able to support an AAPI artist. You know, we're just going to continue to help promote the work of local artists through the different channels. And I think everybody's really, you know, open to having more dialogue. So we'll keep you posted on other projects that we have in the works. So thank you for coming today. It was really a pleasure to have so many people join the conversation.
Thank you, everyone. This will be available in the next week on our website for those of you who are.
Hi, Sunshine.
Thanks.